Hey guys, welcome back. I've got a Stihl 026 chainsaw here. It came in the shop. Customer says it's leaking bar oil. Now, most chainsaws leak bar oil when they sit anyways, but in today's video, I want to show you all the steps that I take to diagnose where that oil is leaking from. So what I do is I basically fill the oil container, and I usually use the winter oil because it is thinner. And because it's thinner, it can work its way better through a lot of cracks. Now it's easy to overfill your saw here, so don't overfill it because that'll make it even harder to know where it's leaking. We're just about full here. And now what I'm going to do is wipe around where the oil cap goes. Now this is an older saw, so it does have the oil caps here that I really like, and I will use the screwdriver to tighten it up nice and tight. Now if you have a newer Stihl saw with the flip-up caps, definitely you need to check that because most of the time it's just the cap that needs to be replaced. So now what I do is I get a clean piece of cardboard. There's no oil stains on it at all. And I just basically put the saw in its normal position like this. I usually do this at the end of the day when I'm just about to close the shop down. Like today, it's almost 5 o'clock. So I'm going to leave it like this. When I come back tomorrow, I'm going to look around to see if there's any oil leaks on the cardboard, and then I go from there. Sometimes it's hard to locate the leak, but I'm hoping it's just the oil cap, but we'll see tomorrow. Okay, I'm back. It's day 2 here. This saw's been sitting for 24 hours. Again, I'm just about to close the shop. And the first thing I'm going to look at here is to see if that oil cap is leaking. And look at that. It sure is leaking. There's a steady drip right here. I'm actually surprised because these caps don't leak that often. But again, this is a 25 to 30-year-old saw, so it's to be expected. It's probably the original cap. So what I'll do here is get rid of this cardboard. Look at the stain on that. I'm just going to replace the oil cap. Now the oil cap that I'm using today to replace the old one is an aftermarket one. So I'm hoping it's going to be good and not leak. Usually I use the OEM caps from Stihl, but I didn't have one handy for this saw here. So I thought, well, I've got one new one left. It's aftermarket, and hopefully it stops that leak. So what I do in this case, after I've replaced the cap, is I clean it very, very good. And I would just want to see by tomorrow again what's going on. So one tip I want to mention here is if you have a leaking cap and you want to make sure it's not leaking again and you want to do this test for the next day, make sure that there is enough oil left in the oil tank. Make sure it's got enough oil that will at least go to halfway up the cap. You can also refill it if a lot of oil leaked. Then the next day you will know if your cap's leaking again. Because you might put a used cap on or a new one that's defective, let's say, and if there's not enough oil left in the tank, then obviously the oil cap will not leak. So it might give you a false sense of thinking that it's not leaking anymore, but then when you fill it, it will leak again. So I have a lot of oil left in the tank, not much leaked. So I'm just going to leave this for another 24 hours. And when I'm closing the shop tomorrow, I will come back with the video camera here and see what's going on. So we'll see you tomorrow. Okay guys, I'm back. I guess it's the 3rd day here. I put the new cap yesterday just before I ended off the video. Now if I look underneath, no leaks, that's great. However, I did notice that it's leaking on this side. And if I lift up the saw here, look at the leak. Or look at all the oil. It's coming from down in here. And usually when I get a leak down here, what I do is I replace the oil line. So the reason why I will change the oil line first is because it's an old saw. It's probably never been replaced before on it. And the rubber deteriorates over 20 years. And the oil lines are not expensive. So I'll show you how to get that oil line out. First of all, I'm going to remove the oil. Now if the string pops out of the little holder, just pop it back in. There we go. And I'll just take the bar and chain off. And as usual, it's always dirty in here, so I'm going to go air blow that first. Okay, now I'm going to take off these covers here, the clutch, and remove the oil pump, and that oil line is right behind there. So there's just one slotted screw here that holds this metal cover. Now with a T27 Torx, get these two screws here out. And now this cover here will pop right off. And I'll pop the clip off the clutch here. Oop, that clip fell in there. There it is. I'll just take this off, the rim sprocket and the clutch drum. Take the clutch bearing off. Now on this saw here, you will need a 19mm socket to remove the clutch. Now it is reverse thread, so just remember that. First though, what I need to do is remove the cover here, access the spark plug, and what I'll be doing is blocking up the engine properly, just to be able to remove the clutch. And I won't be using an impact to remove the clutch, guys, because you can end up damaging the flywheel key. And this saw here looks like it's got a really old plug as well. And by the way, this is the piston stop I'll be using to block up the piston here so that I can remove the clutch. And I'll have the part number in the video description, just in case you want to buy this from the Stihl dealer. So the way to use this piston stop is you insert it into the spark plug hole. I'm going to leave it just like this. Then I'm turning the clutch here, as you can see with the socket. Now I know that it's locking properly. And if you don't have the tool and you want to use a nylon rope, guys, I've got a video that shows with a chainsaw cutout on how to properly use a rope so you don't get it caught in the ports. And the link to that video is in the description and also in the comment section. So now I've got it locked in well, got the socket, got the pressure here just to keep everything in place. And now what I'm going to do is just whack the ratchet. There we go. And no damage caused. You don't want to cause your patient more damage than it already has. So as to be expected, it's a dirty mess in here. I'm going to go air blow that and I will be right back. Okay, here's a better look with my flashlight. Here's the oil pump. Here's the hose that goes from the pump to the top. And this is where the pump accesses the oil tank. Now, the more critical of the two oil lines here to replace is the one under here. So you can actually remove the worm gear. Look at that, a nice metal worm gear. You don't see that too often now. And you're going to need your T27 again torque. Now I usually try not to remove the brake band if I don't have to, but I may have to remove it in this case here, we'll see. Yeah, you know what, I'm going to remove it just to make things easier. So make sure the brake band is in the off position. So it's quite easy to remove. Okay, so having a look here at the pump and the line, this line still looks good, so I'm just going to leave it. I hate to start pulling on old stuff like this because you just never know what can happen. Sometimes these things get brittle and it can all break, but it does look good, so I'm going to leave this part here with the line, and I will remove the oil line, which is the one right here. And when you pull this out, you end up getting the oil filter on it. And what I'm going to do now is order the OEM oil line from Stihl. I don't want to use an aftermarket one for these critical parts here because I don't want leaks again. The Stihl rubber is much better than the aftermarket lines, I find. And for the price, it's not a big deal. It's probably only $10 to $15 for that line. So I'll see you guys back here once I get the oil line. I'll put it all back together and do the oil test again. Okay guys, I'm back here with the new oil line and I ordered the original Stihl one. Here's the part number 1122-647 $9,400. Now these were under 10 bucks, so I bought two so that I'd have a spare one in the shop. So what I'll do here is just take the oil filter off the old one, and it goes on there quite tight. Now what I did here is cleaned around the area where the oil line goes back in. You want to make sure that is super clean, because I think this is where the leak is coming from, or was coming from. So shove it in, and you want that little tab here to be pointing downwards. Now when you put the line in, I'll pull it out here to show you, it's got a built-in grommet, so be careful when you insert it. You have to actually pop it in. I'll show you that in a few seconds here. So I don't do many of these. I'll just try to push it in by hand there. It'll go in really easy by hand, guys. Try not to use a screwdriver if you don't have to, because you can easily puncture them. And what I've done to here is air blew the pump. Now the pump sits right over the line here, as you can see. And now I'm going to put in the two screws. Again, you'll need your T27 screwdriver for this. And tighten up the two screws evenly, guys. Okay, now I will put more bar oil in. Do this test here all over again. And I'm using a funnel here to make sure I don't spill any on the side. And I'll fill it at least 3/4 full. Whoa. So look at what happened here, exactly what I didn't want to happen. It's so easy to overfill these. All right, so I've got the cap back on. I'm going to clean all this with brake cleaner. And I'm putting the cap on with the screwdriver to make sure it's super tight. And I'm going to clean this because I don't want this to give me a false reading. You know, I don't want to think that it's leaking, but in reality it was all this oil here. That's why I want to clean it up really, really well. Okay, I've cleaned it all up with the brake cleaner here, put it back on a clean piece of cardboard. Now there's just a little bit of oil coming out of this tiny hole here, but the main thing I want to make sure is that there's no oil coming out where the oil pump goes on top of the oil line in there. So I'm going to leave this out here for about a day or two, and then I'll come back and show you the results. Hey guys, I'm back again. In the last video clip, you saw how I just replaced the oil line. There is no leak from here anymore. And also, it's not leaking as much oil as what it did before I replaced the oil line. There it is. However, it is leaking from this little vent hole here. So this hole up top sends oil to the bar. So this one here where the screwdriver is, but this little one here is a vent hole. It's a one-way valve, and I believe it vents inside the tank, so it sucks air inside the tank, I believe a friend of mine was telling me. He told me that sometimes these little valves can get defective, and you're going to get some oil that will leak out of the tank like this. So it's pretty hard to stop, but he did tell me about a trick here. I'm going to show you that right now. What he told me is to dump out the oil and then just run some air from your compressor very lightly over the hole here with the oil cap off. Now he said sometimes there can be a little bit of dirt inside here that will cause this to happen. So this is what I'm going to do in the video. It's the absolute last straw that I will pull out to try to get this saw to stop leaking oil. So I'm just going to dump all the oil here. And I'm going to save this oil because it's brand new oil. The tank was pretty full. And I would imagine if that little valve is having issues, once you fill the tank, it could leak even more. Okay, this will be good enough here. And this is that little valve. Look at that, eh? Okay, so I've got my blowgun here. Again, do this very lightly, like don't put the blowgun on here and blow at all pressure. It's bad for that little valve. Apparently what I need to do is just kind of give it little puffs of air, not too many, maybe once or twice. And if there's dirt, it will come out. Again, it's not a guarantee that it will fix the leak. All right, so here we go. And make sure to wear your glasses, safety glasses when you do this. So I'll give it one more. there too. Okay, so this time I know I will not be overfilling it because I'm just pouring back the oil in from the container I took it out of. And what I'll do is clean it with brake cleaner again. And I'm thinking here, if I actually tip the saw over, I will know right away if it's leaking. So far, so good. So what I'll do anyway, guys, is I'm going to clean it up and then I'm going to come back in 24 hours and let you know how this turned out. See you then. Okay guys, I'm back here. I've had the saw sitting here since the last video cut for about 3-4 days and I don't see any oil leaks anywhere. So if you'll recall here, I blew a bit of air in this little valve. It's like a vent valve for the oil tank, and all I've got is a small residue like this. So the saw isn't leaking oil anymore. However, I did find out that you can buy this little valve, and I did buy one. It's only like $4, guys, so I'm actually going to replace it anyway. But if you're in a jam, just do like I did. Drain out the oil from your oil tank, run a bit of air through the little hole here inside the tank, and it should clear it up if it's dirty. Now, sometimes you'll have to replace it anyway. And for $4, why not replace it? So I'll show you how to do that right now. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is drain the oil again. Here's one more good reason to not buy aftermarket caps like I did here. They'll break easily using the scrunch. So if you have an aftermarket one, just use a bigger screwdriver. So I will actually replace that oil cap again. See, now the thing's falling off. Yeah, guys, it's not worth buying aftermarket oil caps. Okay, that'll be good enough. To remove the little valve here, Stihl recommends punching it toward the inside of the tank. So what I'll be using here is a 1/4 inch pin punch. And it'll just go right in the oil tank like that. So it was just basically pressed right in there. And I'm just going to get it out like this. There we go. And here it is, just a tiny little part. And here's the part number 1128 640 9100. So I bought a couple of them just because they're cheap, and a lot of saws that come in the shop, that's all they will need, and possibly an oil cap. And now to reinstall it, just do it from the outside. And you don't want to punch it in too deep. So take note before you take it out how far it sticks out from the metal body here, the body of the saw. Oops, the brake came on. This one's going in really tight. And there it is installed. I don't think there'll be an issue now with oil leaking from this saw. Okay, so I put back the bar oil in the tank, and I'm going to put the worm gear here back on. Okay, now I'll put the brake band back on. And it's easier to put in if the brake is disengaged, so make sure this is pulled back. Now to tighten up the bar, I'm just going to hold the flywheel lightly here and just tighten it up just a bit. When I put the bar and chain on, it will tighten up itself automatically. But just don't rev it without the bar and chain on after you've just put it on like this. And I'm putting just a bit of lithium grease here on the clutch bearing. Pack it in there really well. Now the 026, you don't need to line up any worm gear shaft at all. It just goes in. Okay, let's get the rim sprocket on here. This cover here can go back on. Again, there's T27 screws for this. Okay, let's get the bar and chain back on. And let's tension it properly here. Always hold the bar up, guys, when you do this. And remember, when you tighten up the nuts, it will add a little bit extra tension on your chain. So just keep that in mind. So that's a bit loose here. And here's the tension that I like to keep. If it were a brand new chain, I would make it a bit tighter because it will stretch. But the old chains like this, they're already stretched, so you don't need to worry about that. Okay, and I think that's it for the oil leak problem on this saw, guys. Finally I can get this thing out of the shop. I waited weeks to get all the parts. The good thing about it is they don't take much space in your shop. So I hope this video has helped you guys to fix a leaky chainsaw. I know it can be a pain, but you know, just do what I did in the video here. I will put all the part numbers in the video description in case you have the exact same saw. Now, if you have the MS260, I know it's very similar to the 026, but the part numbers will be different in most cases. So just make sure you double check your part numbers first. Thanks again for watching, guys. If you have any tips on fixing a leaking chainsaw, please comment below. Have a great day.